Imagine being rejected by the biggest clubs in your city because they thought you were too small and too weak. Now imagine that same player later becoming the Champions League's top scorer. Sounds impossible, but that's exactly what happened to Raphinha. Before Barcelona, before the trophies, and before Europe knew his name, he was a kid from one of Brazil's toughest neighborhoods, struggling for food after training and fighting to keep his dream alive. So what did everyone miss? And how did a rejected boy become one of the most important players in world football? Every great journey starts somewhere. Raphinha started in Restinga, a tough neighborhood on the southern edge of Porto Alegre, where football was played in the streets because the streets were almost all that most kids had. Born on December 14, 1996, Raphinha grew up in a one-room house shared by his parents, his brother, and his dogs and cats. But there was one detail that made his story different. His father played drums for Ronaldinho's favorite samba band and returned from Spain with stories about Barcelona and Camp Nou. Raphinha grew up wearing a Barcelona jersey gifted through that connection. Even before playing professionally, Raphinha dreamed of a club he had never seen. In Restinga, football wasn't something you practiced. It was something you survived. He played Varzea football on dusty streets against older, bigger boys who never gave anything away. If you wanted the ball, you fought for it. If you got knocked down, you got back up. And Raphinha always got back up. Sometimes after training, he stood on the street, asking strangers for food while he waited for the bus home. Some helped, some insulted him. He remembered both. Soon, the city's two biggest clubs told him he wasn't good enough. The first people to see Raphinha's potential were also the first to reject it. He trialed for Grêmio and International, Porto Alegre's two biggest clubs. Both decided, too small, too thin, not strong enough. At 13, that's the kind of verdict that ends most dreams. But Raphinha refused to accept it. Imbituba, a smaller club, gave him a chance, leading him to Avaí, where coaches noticed what bigger clubs had missed. The scouts saw his size. They didn't see his fight, and that difference would change everything. Just when Raphinha's career was finally moving forward, everything stopped. A serious injury at Avaí threatened to undo years of sacrifice, but the bigger challenge came at home. Watching her son struggle, his mother gave him a choice: find a real job or find a future she could believe in. It was a fair question. Most football dreams don't come true. Most end exactly where Raphinha's could have ended, but he refused to quit. He recovered, returned, and kept chasing the dream everyone told him to leave behind. That decision changed everything. Then came the phone call that changed Raphinha's life. Former Barcelona midfielder Deco saw something others missed. He signed Raphinha to his agency and took him to Portugal in 2016. For the first time, Raphinha was leaving Brazil. For the first time, he was chasing his dream thousands of miles from home. He joined Vitória de Guimarães, then moved to Sporting CP and later to Rennes in France. Step by step, the boy from Restinga was getting closer. What he didn't know was that England was about to make the world notice him. England changed everything. When Leeds United returned to the Premier League in 2020, Marcelo Bielsa needed players who could handle chaos. Raphinha was one. Almost immediately, he became Leeds' most dangerous player. The one defenders feared, the one fans waited to see on the ball. His performances earned a Brazil call-up and interest from Europe's biggest clubs. Then Barcelona made their move, and suddenly the dream his father had described for years was no longer a story. It was a contract waiting to be signed. In 2022, Raphinha finally arrived at Barcelona, the club he heard about as a child, the club that his father described in Ronaldinho's stories, the club that paid 58 million euros to bring him to Camp Nou. But dreams don't always come true overnight. His first 2 seasons were good but not spectacular. 10 goals and 12 assists. Then 10 goals and 11 assists. Enough to help the team, not enough to silence every doubt. Yet while critics focused on the numbers, something else was happening. The player who had spent his whole life proving people wrong was preparing to do it again, on the biggest stage of all. Then came the season that changed the conversation. For 2 years, Raphinha had been a good player for Barcelona. In 2024/25, he became something else. The numbers were impossible to ignore. 34 goals, 22 assists, and 13 Champions League goals. More than any player in Europe. Suddenly, the same player who once struggled for recognition was carrying Barcelona on the biggest nights. The same player who was rejected for being too small was dominating the toughest competition in club football. And the most remarkable part? His talent had always been there. The talent had always been there. The world just took longer to notice. Some stories come full circle. This one almost feels impossible. In 2003, Barcelona president Joan Laporta signed Ronaldinho, the player whose connection to Samba Tree brought Barcelona stories and gifted jerseys into Raphinha's neighborhood. In 2022, Laporta signed Raphinha. Same president, same club, same dream. The boy who grew up hearing stories about Camp Nou from his father was now living them himself. And here's the remarkable part. He didn't just reach Barcelona, he became the player his neighborhood looked up to. The kid who once wore the jersey had become the reason others wear it. By 2025, Raphinha had become everything the scouts said he never would. A Barcelona star, Brazil's captain, one of the most effective attacking players in world football. But the statistics are not the most important part of this story. The most important part is the boy from Restinga, the boy who played barefoot in the streets, the boy who stood on the street corners after training, hoping someone would buy him something to eat. Because that boy never disappeared. He carried the street's creativity, the rejection's resilience, and the hunger's determination all the way to Camp Nou. Gremio said he was too small, International said he was too thin. The Champions League delivered the final verdict. When you step back and look at the entire journey, the statistics stop being the most interesting part. The goals matter, the trophies matter, the Champions League scoring crown matters, but none of those things explains how a boy from Restinga reached a stage that once existed only in stories. Because this story was never really about football, it was about belief. A father returned from Spain and described Barcelona as if it were a real place rather than an impossible dream. He brought back jerseys, he shared stories, and a young boy listened. Years later, that same boy walked into Camp Nou wearing the badge he had imagined since childhood. Not because the path was easy, because every time life offered him a reason to turn back, he chose to move forward. And somewhere in Restinga today, another child is kicking a ball through the same streets, hearing the same stories, and looking at Raphinha as proof that impossible dreams sometimes have real addresses. His father told him about Barcelona. Raphinha became part of the story. From the streets of Restinga to the top of the Champions League scoring charts, Raphinha's journey proves that some dreams survive every obstacle. You now know the full story, from rejection and hardship to Barcelona and European football's biggest stage. If you enjoyed this deep dive, like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories behind the headlines. And now tell me, which moment stayed with you most? The rejections, the hunger, the Deco call, the Barcelona dream, or the Champions League breakthrough? Drop your answer in the comments below.